You are gods, children of the Most High, all of you. That's Psalm 82:6.
So that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, good to meet you,
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Divinity. And then read the last words, if God is that, and the whole paragraph, if you don't mind, is from Deuteronomy.
From Deuteronomy 6:4.
If God, from the very bottom of this page, if God.
If God is that to which one gives oneself unreservedly to have more, then one God is to live a life of divided loyalties. If God is to be whole,
If life is to be whole.
if life is to be whole, if one is not to spend one's days darting from one cosmic bureaucrat to another to discover who's in charge that day, if in short there is a consistent way in which life is to be lived, if it is to move forward toward fulfillment, a way that could be searched out and approximated, there must be a singleness to that other that supports this way, that there has been the foundation of Jewish belief. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
So what do we think? He's saying that if you want to be unified, focused, you need one God. You can't have one God for the morning and one for the evening.
Mm-hmm.
One God, one woman. What do we think? I mean, because that has turned into horrors, right? Because people think, the Pope John the 23rd said this when he had an ecumenical conference.
Mm-hmm.
We invited Jews and Protestants, Orthodox Christians, Buddhists, Hindus. He said, okay, we're all gathered together. You people are free to worship God in your way. And I'm free to worship God in His way.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting passage in the next paragraph. It talks about Lucretius. It says, this insight caused Lucretius a short distance around the Mediterranean and Rome to preach atheism on grounds that were actually religious. If the gods are as Romans believed them to be immoral, vindictive, and capricious, meaningful existence requires that they be opposed or rejected. The God of the Jews possessed none of these traits, which in greater or lesser degree characterize the gods of their neighbors. So, like, I think Lucretius was looking, he was I think he was a philosopher, right? He was looking
a poet, yes.
A poet. He was looking for this kind God. He was trying to say, well, if you're preaching this kind God, then why aren't you?
I mean, and Houston Smith is putting a wonderful positive spin, but certainly the Hebrew God is very violent, capricious. Satan says, he says, Satan, what do you see around the world? And Satan says, no one really loves you. And God says, what about my servant Job? And Satan says, that's because you're giving him good stuff. And God says, well, you can do whatever you want with him, just don't kill him. So his children die. It's really... So Houston Smith is kind to say that God is capricious. But that's not the God that
the view that they have.
That's certainly not the Hebrew God. And the Christian God, the book of Revelations is brutal. Most people die.
So it's not necessarily an Old Testament versus New Testament then?
No. And Joshua Jesus thought the world would end. Wasn't right about that.
Very apocalyptic.
He thought it was going to happen. Some of you are alive now and you'll see the second coming.
Yeah, my aunts told me that 20 years ago and I'm like, we're still here.
Now we're been here for 2,000 years. That's okay. Judaism, Israel fell. He was right about that, which was horrible enough.
70 AD, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so, do we agree? The facts aren't right that the Hebrew God isn't capricious like the Roman gods. But unlike the Roman gods, the Hebrew God is learning from his mistakes. And actually in the story of Abraham, there's many names for divinity. You know this better than I. Elohim, Elohim, which is a plural.
Yeah.
It means God.
Yeah.
or judges.
Yep.
As well as it's used with the singular verb, but it's very interesting. It's
It
a
is.
plural.
Yeah.
When Moses gets from Yahweh, thou shalt not have no other gods before me, guess what the word for gods is?
Elohim.
Elohim, yes.
Yeah.
And there's other words for divinity in the story of Abraham. El Shaddai, which literally means,
Breast.
yes, a female breast. Yum.
Shad. Yeah.
Yes. And they don't want you to know this, so they say it means
Yeah.
powerful one
Yeah.
or almighty.
Which is kind of the opposite.
Yes.
It's kind of opposite of what it
The
actually means.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
So there's many different divinities in the story of Abraham, and maybe they start working together. But very revealing, because you mentioned atheism. After Elohim asks Abram to sacrifice Isaac, he asks him, actually in Hebrew the word is please. Please take your son. It's nah.
Wow.
And people who don't want you to hear the truth translate that as now, which it can be too, but it really was please.
Huh.
And some part of Abraham, I'm sure, wanted to do that too. I don't think he thought Isaac was his son, because he had given Sarah away and to Pharaoh, and strangers came to visit Sarah when Abraham had gone to make a calf for them. And Abraham again gave her away to Abimelech just before Isaac was conceived. So there's lots of ambiguity of who the father is. No wonder Abraham was very angry. And he served God with the evil impulse. He had this desire to sacrifice or kill, but he turned it into a ritual so that at the end he could hear. He took two boys along with him on the journey. They were called lads, just like Isaac was. And he hears two voices. Abraham, don't raise your, let go of that knife and don't do anything to, and that could have been the two boys. And after that, Abraham never, like the Hebrew Bible, never experiences God's voice again. He even tells God what to do. He tells his servant, God is going to help you find a wife. And then, nothing, Joe. At the end of his life, it says that Abraham dies and is gathered to his people. No more. He doesn't want to have to do with, no wonder that God wanted. So he was breaking through to maybe some new way to be. Maybe it included divinity, maybe not. So the Hebrew Bible is, as the philosopher Nietzsche said, if you want to find out how people are, read the Hebrew Bible. So he broke free of that voice that was so brutal to him.
So there's a point where he's talking to Moses where he reveals the name. He reveals the ineffable name to Moses, and he says, I revealed myself as, I believe this is what it was, I revealed myself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as Elohim.
As El Shaddai.
As El Shaddai. But I have revealed myself to you as the name.
Yahweh.
Yahweh, that's right.
Yeah.
So, meaning, or you can even say it in the Hebrew, Ayeh Asher Ayeh.
Yeah.
I am that which I will be.
It's an interesting translation.
It is. There's many.
Very nice.
It's.
I like your translation. I've never heard it.
Yeah, and well, that's. I think it's one of the most accurate, because then you have, in Revelation, where he says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega," or the Aleph and the Tav, right? So you have the beginning and the end. He is the one in the middle there, the creator, the finisher, the author and the finisher. Then, so he's giving that. I'm the one that it was before, but you didn't really know me like that. So maybe they perceived God to be this, sort of character.
El Shaddai.
Right? This
Power
power.
of my female breast. A feminine divinity.
So they saw maybe a little bit of both. So they saw they saw like a side of him that was very merciful, but they also saw, don't cross him, right?
Yeah.
Don't cross him, like a mother bear. You know what I mean? Don't cross that. because you know what happens when you try to steal a cub. But it's also out of love. That powerful side of him was also out of love, whereas many of the other gods in Psalm 82. Psalm 82. I think this is my biggest curiosity, is that it says you will die like men. It says you are gods, but you will die like men.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it does.
Want to read it for us?
Let me see here. I'm trying to find the actual passage. I put my bookmark somewhere else. Oh, here it is. Second, unlike Yahweh, they were mortal. You shall die like mortals and fall like any prince. It's Psalm 82:7. And I think what's happening here, and I follow a scholar that did his thesis on this. He's very interesting. Dr. Michael Heiser, I mentioned it before. But he's very interesting because he says, like you were saying, we all have that spark of divinity, that we were created to be like God in His image. But it's called the divine council, in which God has appointed, like the 24 elders in Revelation. He has appointed other deities who He has created. Some may call them angels, not necessarily malak. They're more than that. They're just divine beings. But He puts them in charge, and at different times in history they rebelled against God, and they caused man to rebel against God. And God wants to restore us back to that council, so that we can share in His kingdom. And it makes a very interesting point in this book. He talks about many of the Greeks, they didn't like physical things. They thought it was all evil. But in Judaism, they saw sex as a good thing.
Yes.
They saw marriage as a good thing. They
Yes.
saw food at the holidays. We have Hanukkah, we have a good time.
Yes.
Make latkes and make merry. But many of the religions, they were like the Stoics. They were very adamant and ascetic, and flagellate yourself all the time, and you gotta.
Everybody's got their hobbies, too.
Yeah. I mean, I that was, like I said, I was addicted to suffering. And I think we do have to go through suffering, but for a good end. We have to remember that there is a good end. There is an expected end, like it says in Jeremiah 29:11, that He will restore us, and He will restore Eden, and I think that was the whole point of Messiah, is that He. However someone may want to see the crucifixion and the resurrection, I think that was the major deal, is that He wants to rescue us like He did the Israelites out of Egypt.
Good. Love it.
Amen.
Amen, brother.
And those are my 2.5 cents.
That's wonderful. I love it.
Is there such a thing as a half cent? No. Maybe a couple shekels.
Sure.
Yeah, those are my 2 shekels.
Thank you so much. That's very heartening.
So, but it's really been interesting, and it really is I wish I had the other book. You had.
I have it with me.
You have the other book?
I picked up many
So let me
passages
flip
for
through
you.
that as well. I'm going to get it myself.
Yes, well, you can buy it, and
I'm going to buy it.
I will pay for it. But there's so many passages I picked. You can do it at random. We could do this like psychic. Just see at random which, these are the pages. You can pick any of my W's, which is wow, and read it and see what we make of it.
Okay.
Just whatever your eye is attracted to. But it'll be a W, this W here. This is
For the wow.
Yeah, one W.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things that are underlined and
Sure. Well, the wow, that's probably, that means
something here.
maybe this.
Okay. The 6th-day humankind. The essential biblical doctrine of humanity and human dignity is found in the following text. To be created in the image of God is to be called to co-create a just and merciful world.
See, that's very Jewish, as
wow.
I was saying.
That is wow.
That is what?
That is wow. That is
Yes,
a wow. Yeah.
So we're doing it together, which is really clear in the Hebrew Bible. One of the things I love about Jeshua, this is my understanding, is he loved the Father, even though they're talking about suffering, the Father was torturing him. And this enabled this is my own perspective, the Father or the divine, either in us or beyond us, when you're loved, when you're doing horrible things, that can turn you around. And so I think Joshua loving the Father, even as King Martin Luther King would, even though he knew he was going to die, still loving God, changed God. And God became more loving. He got his violence out. I mean, I don't know, whatever, maybe Joshua was getting too close to him, couldn't handle it. And then God became more loving. So since Joshua's loving death, loving his suffering, he was able to get, as you might want to be, beyond suffering. Beyond, you don't need that anymore. I now feel a loving God, not a punishing God. Same as the book of Job. God says, I would have punished your friends for saying such silly things like you were to blame because you're suffering. But they're your friends, so I won't do that.
The way that I understood Christianity when I was still in a mainstream church, I had to understand the atonement for a long time, because I always wondered this. What is the connection between a vicarious atonement and my forgiveness, or how does that connect? How did a man who died 2,000 years ago attain my forgiveness? And I always wondered that, and I think
attain your forgiveness or forgive you,
or forgive me, or how does that connect? I always wondered that.
Yeah.
How do you appropriate that from?
Great question.
Yeah, and that's just something I've always wrestled with, and I probably always will wrestle with. I think at this point in my faith and in my walk, I think I'm not supposed to understand everything, but I'm supposed to accept it enough. Like I said last week, like science, I'm not supposed to understand everything, but I understand it enough to keep searching.
Yes, from my perspective, when Joshua was able to love God when God was torturing him, just like Martin Luther King and Gandhi did, that was a successful nonviolent revolution. And the God that was a punishing God, even from Job, being able to be loved even when he was, torturing his son, that changed God into a more loving God.
So in other words, it became...
And so the God that we experience now, since Joshua, is a more loving God. A God who doesn't need to punish us. A God that, because he's loved, can be loving toward us and understand, just like him, we all make mistakes, and when we see those mistakes, we can grow.
It's kind of an amazing thought, and to think that God suffers, God repents, God because how could we understand, let's put it this way, how could we understand even forgiveness and mercy if he was never in that position? It's relatable, it says that he was tempted with everything, like when the devil took him into the desert and he was tempted with all the kingdoms of the world, and then you see him in front of Pilate, right? And Pilate's like, I don't get you, man. You're he says, well, look, my kingdom's not of this world. It's a spiritual kingdom. I'm not here rebelling. I'm not here trying to start a war.
Even though it looked it.
It looked like it.
Coming into Jerusalem and everyone saying, "Hail to the King."
Yeah, it was a spiritual war, but they didn't get it.
But he must have known. They would think, if they're saying "Hail to the King," here's the King of the Jews. He was no dummy. He knew how that would come across.
So, do you think that that Yeshua as Messiah fulfilled those things, or do you think that's still coming? Do you think that?
Well, he did help us, which is really important to me. you must know this, most of us have a punishing part of our mind
Mm-hmm.
and spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeshua was able to embrace that punishing part, whatever you call it. You could call it God, Father, and say, I love you anyway. Into your hands I commend my spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Forgive them, for they know not what they do. So because he was in that excruciating situation, able to love, that spirit that's in all of us was transformed into a loving, forgiving spirit. And so we can, if we really get in touch with the God of Jeshua, we can forgive ourselves as he forgave God, and love ourselves, and love our enemies.
And extend it over into others.
Yes, and it's an energy, a divine, loving energy that he helped liberate in that most extraordinarily excruciating, you're no stranger to that yourself, situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do gotta thank God for his ability to open my mind on these things. You know, in Christianity you call it Pentecost, but in Shavuot, when the many of the Jews come from different places to Jerusalem in the book of Acts chapter 2, and you have the very Ruach, the life force of God, inhabiting his people, as they were celebrating the giving of the Torah. So it was not just a Torah on stone. It was a living Torah.
Beautiful.
It became a living Torah.
Beautiful.
So I think that's the beautiful idea of the new covenant.
And Torah is another word for way. It means law too, but just guidelines.
Yeah, teachings
to go to discover the way.
Yeah, and that's what they called themselves, the first Christians. They called themselves the followers of the way.
Wow.
And Yeshua called himself the way.
Yeah, and the way and the truth and the light.
Probably maybe they called it Hadarech, the way.
Oh, from the Hebrew.
Yeah.
Well, we're winding down. We have 3.5 minutes. Is there any last things you would like to share with the audience?
I would say that my lesson is to be able to humble myself enough to realize that I will probably never understand everything about a huge, glorious God.
Well, you're young, Joe.
Yeah.
You never know what tomorrow will bring.
Exactly. I don't know what I'm going to understand tomorrow.
Yes.
And what I'm going to be able to practice tomorrow. But every day is different.
Yes.
And every day is new. So there's always something new the next day.
My mother and I used to pray on my rooftop after we did yoga in the morning. Each day, have you ever heard this? In every way, we're growing better and better and better and better and better and better and better.
In little bits, little increments.
Yes, inch by inch and row by row.
That's right. Well, I mean, it's been good, and I'm still gonna take a look at these things, and I like the way the book is written. I like the way this book is written, that the world's religions. He goes through all the different components. He goes from the history to the practice to on a very personal level too, philosophically, and because it's a balance.
I hope you will read this too, because we'll be back here in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I think we'll do one more on Judaism.
Yeah, I think we got.
We'll see.
I'll go through this one. I went through the other one. I'll go through this one.
Yes, we could read Christianity, but I think because you haven't read all of this yet, and you will, and then you'll have marked passages you want to discuss, and maybe Sarah will too.
It'll be my own book, not marking a library book.
Yes, so we'll be back in 2 weeks discussing Judaism for the last time as a launching pad to Christianity, Islam, and other traditions. Thank you for joining us. Maybe, Joe, you can leave us with a prayer.
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Thank you, great God, Lord. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to discuss your principles and your truth and your love and your kindness, and reflect on the things that you are doing in our lives. You are still active. You are still our great God. You are still the Creator, and you are very ever present in a time of need. Amen.
Amen. Well, God and Goddess, be with all of us. May we co-create blessings, night and day, in all we do and feel and think and say.
Bless you.